Georgia investigators are relieved to find no one at home during a house fire. But as forensic examiners know, first impressions can be deceiving. In the dense woods of northern Tennessee, a hunter discovers the abandoned car of a missing woman. Detectives quickly realize the scene poses more questions than it answers. Although investigators routinely rely on first-hand accounts and physical evidence to piece together clues, there are times no such clues are apparent. It is these times when science acts as eyes, leading law enforcement to answers. When forensic science takes the place of an absent witness. In this episode, some of the names have been changed. The Savannah River is at once both tranquil and mighty. Its waters run fast and deep. Beneath its surface lies a murky world full of dark secrets. On August 15, 1998, the Richmond-Augusta County Fire Department in Augusta, Georgia, responded to an urgent 911 call. A house on Elizabeth Drive was on fire. Investigators arrived as dense smoke consumed the house. They scrambled to bring the fire under control. As firefighters made their way through the smoke, they detected the faint smell of gasoline. They hurried to find anyone who may be trapped inside. There were indications the fire started in the foyer. Although the bedroom was filled with smoke, there was little damage from the fire. Firefighters were relieved to find no one was home. It was now up to arson investigators to determine the cause of the fire. Neighbors told police a man named Al Hamilton owned and lived in the house. They hadn't seen him since yesterday, and his car was gone.
Okay, does anyone else live here with him?
I don't think anybody lives.
The Richmond County Sheriff's Department began a routine investigation. To investigator Dwayne Piper, there were many unanswered questions.
My initial impression of the scene was that there was foul play involved. The fires did not seem to start from the actual walls themselves. They seemed to originate just out from the wall. And in my mind, that suggested that it wasn't an electrical fire.
Later that afternoon, a woman named Donna Edwards arrived at the Sheriff's Department.
Okay, thank you.
She She said she was Al Hamilton's girlfriend and was concerned when he missed their date. She drove by his house and panicked.
His house was burning, and they said I should come.
Well,
here
we've
and
been to the
see.
house, and I can assure you Al was not in the house.
Donna was relieved to hear that no one was injured, but she was still worried.
No. I haven't even talked to him since last night. The last I saw of him, maybe before I
It
go
wasn't
sleep,
like him to just take off without a word.
Slept straight through. And he tells me everything.
Does he have any family?
Hamilton was very close to his family.
Could check his mom.
He took care of his elderly mother and disabled sister who lived in town.
Yes, yeah.
Donna called them, and they hadn't heard from him either.
Does he have any family around here?
Recently divorced and living in her mother's house, Donna told Piper she and Hamilton were very happy.
Come here, baby. Look at this one. Right here in this Peters community.
They were looking to buy land and build a house together.
Resort Center. Clubhouse.
Donna had plans with Hamilton to look at property that morning,
Couple
but he never showed up.
Peters community. Kind of the same thing.
Where does he work?
He works out.
Donna told Detective Piper that Hamilton worked as a manager at a local bar.
Normally he calls and
She worried about his long hours and said he didn't get off work until after 3 a.m.
I'll get someone to go speak with his mom, and I'll go talk to his
She was sure something happened to him.
And you'll get back with me as
I'll
soon
give
as
you a
possible.
call, and I'll go talk to his
Although he agreed to look into it, Investigator Piper explained to Donna there was little he could do.
I'll get in touch with you as soon as we get it.
Hamilton was a grown man and could disappear if he wanted. After 2 days, there was still no word from Al Hamilton. Piper and his partner, investigator Joanne Nutter, were eager to read the arson report.
And according to the arson investigator, the fire was not accidental.
The report indicated there were 2 sources of origin.
There was no
The fires were set using an accelerant in both the entryway and the bedroom.
and according to their summary, the fire was
Although they suspected the accelerant was gasoline, the results were inconclusive. Al Hamilton was still missing, and the report convinced investigators something terrible had happened. They needed to find him.
1012, 1065, missing vehicle. 1012, 1065, missing vehicle. Be on the lookout for a
An
gray
APB went out to field officers to be on the lookout for Hamilton and his car.
South Carolina plate.
Piper suspected there were more answers at the crime scene.
Hello, this is Investigator Piper with the Sheriff's Office, Richmond County.
He called the Georgia Public Safety Office for assistance.
Pick it up, thanks.
Investigator Piper and forensic expert Jerry Findley of the GPS met at Hamilton's house.
Jerry.
Findley noticed a strange dent on the footboard of the bed.
Yeah, it's like an impact of some kind, some object there, some rounded. It was consistent in size and shape with a baseball bat.
Findley also saw what appeared to be blood on the footboard. The pattern resembled a swipe stain.
A swipe stain is when a bloody object comes in contact with a non-bloody surface, and you can tell movement and direction which way the swipe is actually going.
The stain traveled from left to right as he faced the foot of the bed. And something else caught his attention.
We found little pieces of hair in the swipe, which would be consistent with a head injury and a bleeding head coming in contact with the footboard. Down in this area here. The location of the stains revealed to me that someone was bludgeoned very severely at the foot of the bed. Yeah, that looks good. Looks good.
As they inspected the room for more clues, they found more blood stains.
At the side of the room on the wall, I observed stains that were consistent with cast-off stains. And in looking at those, I believe that there had to be more there. Do this very carefully because we don't know how stable they are.
Findley needed to get a closer look.
Up here at the top. I got a rag and started wiping and found the remainder of the cast-off stains were under the soot.
Findlay discovered that the soot had preserved the blood. This indicated the fire was set after the beating. Someone had tried to cover up a violent act. To reconstruct the events, Findlay ran strings backwards, from the blood spatter on the walls to the area of origin of the blood.
Where you want to put the string. Okay. Okay.
A laser beam helped him determine the exact angles and trajectories of the spatter.
And that's where you need to go here. I completed my analysis by first determining the directionality of the impact stains. I calculated the angles at which they actually struck the wall and drew the strings back to where the strings crossed. That is the point of origin of the blood, which would have to be the head of the victim. Okay, Dwayne, one thing I can tell you right now. The person was either on his knees or sitting down at the time he was being bludgeoned. Right in this area right here. This is the area of impact for these stains. Right in this area.
The dent on the footboard suggested the victim was struck with a blunt force object. Using a baseball bat in the lab, Findlay replicated the cast-off spatter found on the bedroom walls.
A cast-off stain is as the item is brought upward from that impact. It has a certain amount of blood on the instrument itself, and that blood is actually being cast off. As it comes across, it's breaking away from that instrument, whether it be a hand, a baseball bat, or a brick or whatever. It's going to break away and be cast upward and out, usually across the ceiling, if you're hitting straight on like so.
Investigators knew something violent had happened in Al Hamilton's house. But now the question was Hamilton the perpetrator or the victim? The blood found at the crime scene was sent to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Crime Lab. Al Hamilton recently had blood work, and his doctor supplied a sample to compare with the blood found on the footboard. They matched. Al Hamilton was the victim. Chief Medical Examiner Chris Sperry analyzed the photographs of the scene. The arc of the blood and the amount of cast-off trajectories told a violent story.
Based upon the evidence that was illustrated in the photographs, this was a crime that incorporated a great deal of aggression, of anger, or perhaps even hatred. All of the blows were directed at the head and probably the face as well, and there were repeated blows. And basically what it indicated was this man was beaten about the head and the face multiple times until he was dead.
Police were now working a homicide. Al Hamilton had not survived the vicious attack. Investigator Piper retraced his last steps.
Hi, I'm Investigator Piper with the Sheriff's Office, Richmond County.
His first stop, the bar where Hamilton worked as a manager.
Last weekend.
His boss told investigators he was a model employee.
No problems with any customers, other employees?
No, he's busy.
He also said nothing out of the ordinary had happened at the bar that night, and Hamilton had locked up around 3 a.m.
No, sir.
Piper met again with Donna Edwards.
I'm okay.
Drive okay?
Yeah, I've been better.
I do need to ask you something.
He asked her if she could think of anyone who would want to harm Hamilton. She did recall something that had happened a few months earlier. She and Hamilton had been returning from dinner one night when a large truck came out of nowhere and headed straight for him. jumped out of the way, but was almost run down. The truck looked like the one her ex-husband, Rodney Richardson, used at work. She said Richardson couldn't come to grips with the divorce and was jealous of her relationship with Hamilton. Donna also told Piper Richardson was abusive throughout their marriage, and she was afraid of him. Recently, he'd even stopped by her mom's house and confronted her about her relationship with Hamilton. But still, Donna didn't believe Richardson was capable of murder. Besides, she said, she had received a phone call from Rodney at 1 a.m. at her mom's house on the night of the murder. He told her he was at a phone booth on the other side of town. To investigator Piper, Rodney Richardson had motive to murder Al Hamilton. But motive doesn't always make a killer. And without a body, it would be difficult to prove a murder took place at all. Both Al Hamilton and his car vanished. A body can be disposed of anywhere. But a car is almost impossible to hide. And the only place large enough to conceal a car was the mighty Savannah River. In Augusta, Georgia, investigators uncovered the brutal slaying of Al Hamilton.
Right now is that when this impact took place,
His killer set fire to his house, attempting to cover up the crime.
the area of impact, the area of origin of these bloodstains.
Donna Edwards, Hamilton's girlfriend, was concerned her ex-husband, Rodney Richardson, was involved. But there was no evidence against him.
No, I said no. I mean, Al was a good guy. No, don't know of anymore.
Hamilton's body and his car were still nowhere to be found. Police believed the answer lay at the bottom of the Savannah River. Despite a thorough search, they found nothing. Investigator Dwayne Piper was frustrated by the case.
Well, there were many challenges that we faced in the investigation. For starters, there was no bodies, so a lot of the evidence had been consumed in the fire or destroyed in the extinguishing of the fire. There were no eyewitnesses to the investigation, so there was no one with whom we could speak that could tell us what happened.
Well, it was real early.
Piper
this
learned
morning.
Richardson dropped by Donna's mother's house on the morning of the fire.
He came in and, well, it was
But Donna was
real
not
early
home.
This morning. He woke me up. I was sound asleep on the couch when he came in.
Donna's mother recalled Richardson carrying 2 cloth bags.
Let's go upstairs and go to bed. I'm pretty tired. I think we'll go to bed.
He asked if he could leave some things in Donna's bedroom. When he came out, he wasn't wearing his shoes, and he no longer had the bags.
Okay, so I'm going to Well, they were there. Here they are.
Great.
She gave the items to the police.
And I'll be back in touch with you, okay?
Piper sent the shoes to the forensic lab for analysis. Piper contacted Donna and asked her why she never mentioned the bags. She said she was afraid to say anything. She recognized the bags as belonging to Hamilton and didn't want to believe that Richardson was somehow involved. Investigator Piper was certain Rodney Richardson had killed Al Hamilton. He now hoped the tennis shoes could place him at the scene. At the lab, the technician examined the shoes for any debris or ash in the treads. And he also ran tests for the presence of gasoline. The treads were clean. Traces of gas were found on the shoes. But traces of gas weren't enough. Richardson worked in construction and came into contact with it daily. Investigators needed more.
At least a few different
Piper, the phone records you submitted?
Yes.
Here they are.
Piper remembered Donna said she received a 1 a.m. call from Richardson on the morning of the fire, saying he was calling from a payphone. Piper wasn't so sure. On a hunch, he secured Al Hamilton's phone records. On the night in question, a call was made from Hamilton's house to Donna's house at 1 a.m. Al Hamilton couldn't have made the call. He worked until 3 a.m. Though circumstantial, the call suggested that Rodney Richardson was in Hamilton's house on the night of the murder.
a moderate level so it doesn't drown out the conversation from across the room.
Okay.
Okay, and once
Police needed direct evidence to make an arrest, and they asked Donna Edwards for help.
Okay. And to activate it,
She agreed and tried to get a confession on tape.
and it will lock on. This reel is going to run for approximately 3 hours, so you don't have to force the conversation down.
Donna recorded her conversations with Rodney over a period of several evenings. She told him she wanted to know what happened to Hamilton so she could get on with her life.
What do you want me to give you? What do you want me to tell
I
you?
want you to just tell me the truth. Tell me what happened. Just tell me what happened. Just tell me.
Richardson finally admitted to the crime.
All right. I killed Al.
He said he hadn't meant to kill Hamilton. He only wanted to scare him.
It was an accident. It's not like I...
But then he lost control.
I mean,
The next thing he knew, Hamilton was dead.
supposed to be your husband, and you treat me like this?
Richardson said he disposed of the body and was sure the police would never find it.
You and him...
And without a body, he bragged, they could never prosecute him. If they tried, he said he would not go down without a fight.
What do you want me to give you? What do you want me to tell you?
I want you to just
The confession was enough to get an arrest warrant.
All right. I killed Al. How about that? I didn't mean it to happen, but it did.
Given Richardson's history of violence, investigators plotted with Donna to take him by surprise. While Donna and Richardson were out, the police hid inside her house.
Rodney under arrest for about
What is it?
Their plan worked. Richardson was arrested without incident. Based on the evidence, investigators believe Rodney Richardson broke into Al Hamilton's home to ambush him. But he was overcome by rage, and after repeated blows, Hamilton was dead. Richardson stashed the body in Hamilton's car and hid the car where no one would find it. Attempting to cover his crime, he set the house on fire. Neither Al Hamilton's body nor his car were ever found. Rodney Richardson was convicted of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison.
The importance of forensic science in this case was absolutely crucial. Without the blood pattern work, the DNA work, and the arson investigation, this case would have never gone to court. There would have never been an arrest. It was through these three methods of investigation that we were able to make the arrest without a body, and to this day we still haven't gotten a body.
Time the impact took place.
Rodney Richardson mistakenly believed without a body, investigators wouldn't be able to make their case against him. he was wrong. In rural Tennessee, authorities must piece together blood-stained clues to find a missing woman, dead or alive. Stewart County, Tennessee is a small rural community where even the police know everyone by name. They average just one violent crime a year. On a Monday night in late 1990, a hunter spotted a car partially hidden by trees. It appeared to have run off the road. As he approached the car, he noticed no one inside. The hunter wrote down the license plate number and contacted police.
911.
The Stewart County Sheriff's Office received the call.
Thank you. Stewart County to 903. There's been a report of an abandoned vehicle.
The dispatcher sent a patrol unit to investigate. She ran the license plate number and discovered the car was registered to June Atkins. Earlier that day, a woman was reported missing. Now, police feared June Atkins was wandering the woods, alone and injured. In Tennessee, Stewart County police were dispatched to an abandoned car that had run off the road. The car was registered to a missing woman named June Atkins. Police found the car wedged against a tree. The passenger side door was opened, and it looked as if someone had gotten out. Inside the car, police found little. They searched the area, wondering if June had crawled out and lay injured somewhere nearby. They found nothing. Sheriff David Hicks questioned June's husband about his missing wife. He said June went to visit her mother in a nearby town, but never arrived. Atkins was concerned. If she didn't go to her mother's house, he didn't know where she was.
We don't start taking missing persons investigations this serious, this quick.
Sheriff Hicks told Atkins he found her car and believed she had been in some kind of accident. June's car was impounded. Investigators hoped it would yield some clues as to her whereabouts. Forensic examiners looked for fingerprints and anything else that would explain what happened to June. But the only thing they found were the missing woman's fingerprints. Police needed to act quickly. If June Atkins was injured and wandering in the woods, she would need medical attention. A team of local and state law enforcement personnel, along with dozens of community volunteers, searched the woods where June's car was discovered.
We had a tremendous amount of help from surrounding counties. A lot of people that just called in volunteering, wanting to help when they heard that June Atkins was missing.
We're going to divide up in two groups. Half of you's going to go on the right side, half of you's going to go on the left side. Stay within 15, 20 foot of one another so you've got good sight of everybody as we go through the woods. Okay, let's go.
The search party fanned out in different directions. Officers on horseback tackled the off-road terrain. The Tennessee Highway Patrol provided helicopter surveillance and a contact point from above. The search lasted for several hours. Police received a call over the radio. Something had been found near the Paris Landing Bridge. Rick Stout of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation was part of the search team.
Hey, David.
He brought what was discovered to Sheriff Hicks.
We got here on Highway 79, just east of the bridge, about a quarter mile off the side of the road.
A group of searchers had found a patchwork quilt.
Blanket or comforter. Here, well, I took it out. I don't want to lose anything in it. And, interesting.
It appeared to be bloodstained. Near the quilt were a pair of men's cotton work gloves.
What's interesting, they were found with the blanket.
The gloves smelled of gasoline. The investigation changed as searchers realized they may now be looking for a body.
Tell us at the lab what kind of petroleum product.
Crime scene technicians joined the search. Later that afternoon, several miles from where the quilt was found, a woman's wallet was discovered.
Search command, I have found a wallet and some identification.
Roger that. We'll get some more search people out your way.
We found some contents of a purse. Some of them we know belonged to June Atkins because her identification was in a wallet that was found. Found some other contents that appear to have come from a purse.
The search continued for several more hours. Then, more disturbing news.
Here, you take the camera.
A large amount of blood had been found in the grass. The area was photographed and the blood swabbed for analysis. They collected anything that may be of help, including blood-soaked grass. Underneath the grass, they found a woman's watch. Rick Stout believed the findings suggested something horrible had happened to June Atkins.
We have a car that was dumped in the woods. We have her personal belongings. We have a quilt that had blood on it, which there's got to be an explanation for that. And when we find personal belongings thrown out along the side of the road, she's not going to do that. You know, her driver's license, her wallet, and other personal items. That tells us that there is foul play involved.
Rick, you take.
There was blood, but no body.
You sign the property receipt.
And investigators had questions.
All this. And you take.
At this point, they had no idea what happened to June Atkins.
We did not find any evidence as to where June might be or her body might be. We had some hopes of possibly finding June alive, but we did not.
Let's see, I think the first thing we'll do is look at
Everything collected was sent to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation Crime Lab.
Okay.
Forensic serologist Patty Choate tested the items for blood.
I opened the quilt up, spread it out. It did have a very large blood stain on it. And so the first thing I did was a chemical color test to see if it was blood. And my chemical color test indicated that it was. So the next thing I wanted to do was determine if it was human blood or not. Definitely blood. So I did testing on that and determined that it was indeed human blood. It's like dirt.
The work gloves were too dark to see any blood.
I do not see a thing. There it is. Look at that.
Using an alternate light source, Choti examined the gloves.
Not very big.
She discovered several small stains resembling blood, but they tested negative. The results were inconclusive.
I don't know.
She then examined the sage grass.
From a different scene, they had brought in some grass that they had just pulled up. And so I looked at the grass and did indeed find blood on the grass. We'll get a picture of it anyway.
The blood on the items was compared with a sample of June Atkins' blood provided by her doctor. The blood matched.
Yeah, she must have been bleeding quite a bit to have this much blood.
Choti was asked by investigators if she could determine whether June was still alive.
The volume of blood that was on the quilt was a fair amount of blood, but I mean, it could have been from maybe a non-lethal injury. But the fact that there was 2 or 3 areas of grass that had blood on it, that was more indicative of someone who had bled out quite a bit. And that was fairly indicative that she could have been mortally wounded. Well,
June Atkins was dead.
Look what we've got. I mean,
Her killer was unknown.
I understand that if we had a body, it'd be better. We've got the quilt, we've got the gloves.
And now, police needed to find out who killed her and why. Tennessee police continued to investigate June Atkins' brutal murder. Although no body was found, massive blood at the scene indicated she could not have survived.
Can you tell me if that's June's watch or not?
June's husband recognized his wife's watch.
Keep that up.
He had given it to her as a Christmas present.
Besides, I picked out Grandpa's present. You guys promised it. It's true.
Sheriff Hicks broke the news of June's murder to her husband and asked if he could think of anyone who wanted to harm her. June's husband recalled a note he found in June's car several weeks before she disappeared. It was in a man's handwriting asking her to meet him at the Dyers Creek boat ramp. That was all he knew. Deputies spoke with June's co-workers, hoping her friends could identify the mystery man. Sheriff David Hicks.
Friends of June told us that June had been seeing a man by the name of Kenneth Pipkin, and that they had been meeting at the Dyers Creek boat ramp.
Hicks tracked down Kenneth Pipkin at the logging site where he worked. He admitted he knew June. He was dating her husband's sister. And he denied ever meeting her at the Dyers Creek boat ramp. Sheriff Hicks was not convinced.
We needed to gather a lot more information before we talked to him again.
Police canvassed the neighborhood around the boat ramp. A clerk at a nearby convenience store knew June well. And she also knew Kenneth Pipkin. She didn't think highly of Pipkin. She described him as a womanizer, obsessed with his truck. So obsessed, he kept a patchwork quilt on the seat to keep it clean. One day, she recalled seeing Pipkin and June talking outside. She watched as June followed him out of the parking lot in the direction of the Dyers Creek boat ramp.
She comes in, gets gas.
The clerk told police Pipkin had come in looking for June on more than one occasion.
I thank you for your help.
Thank you.
Her story did not match Pipkin's.
We've just got 3 missing.
Police got a break. A fisherman called in with new information.
He said on the day she disappeared that he was at the Dyers Creek boat ramp. He saw a woman and a man in a pickup truck.
His description of the vehicles matched both Pipkin's and June's. Police brought Kenneth Pipkin in for questioning. They showed him pictures of the bloody quilt.
I remember having a blanket.
He admitted it was similar to one he used in his truck.
Okay. Do you have a?
But his had been stolen earlier that year.
Do you have your? Remember having quilts?
Pipkin swore he had nothing to do with June's disappearance.
Do you have your blanket with you in your truck?
He claimed he hadn't even seen her on the day she disappeared.
I have. I'm showing you.
Police knew Kenneth Pipkin was lying,
I just know I have.
but they needed more to prove he was a murderer. Now they needed to learn why. Police in Tennessee had a suspect in the murder of June Atkins. Large amounts of her blood were found in the nearby forest, but no body had been recovered.
I got pictures of it, but we probably need to spread it out when we get in better.
The suspect, Kenneth Pipkin, was seen with her shortly before her disappearance. A search warrant was issued for his truck and home. Crime techs processed the vehicle. They discovered tiny cloth fibers on the floor. They were collected and sent to the crime lab. Several pairs of cotton work gloves were found in the house. They were the same size and style as those found at the crime scene. The evidence was sent back to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. Forensic specialist Russ Davis assisted on the case. He brushed the quilt found at the crime scene, collecting any loose fibers.
The issue became, can we connect the victim through this blanket to our suspect? And that's where the fiber evidence came from. Fiber is associative evidence. Fibers are the basic unit of all textiles. Clothing, carpeting, anything like that will shed the fibers, the very small portion which makes up the textile garment. And that's what can transfer.
Davis then checked for a match.
Those samples are then compared to the known samples from the vehicle in this case. Then they are looked at to determine if there in fact was fibers just like the ones found on the blanket found inside the vehicle.
Fibers from the bloody quilt matched the fibers collected from Pipkin's truck.
The report went out dealing with the serological evidence that this quilt had in fact been bled on by the victim. The following work on the fiber then said that this material in this swatch of the quilt in fact There were fibers like that found in the suspect's vehicle. That makes a link between suspect and victim through this quilt.
I think we have enough evidence to prove to a Stewart County jury that she's dead and Kenneth Pipkin guilty.
Well, you know, David,
The evidence was presented to District Attorney Dan Also Brooks.
we're gonna have a hard time proving that she's dead when we don't have a body. We just got one shot at this.
Also Brooks was apprehensive about taking Pipkin to trial.
The obvious challenge of the case was the lack of a body. Once we got to trial, with this issue of not having a body end up being reasonable doubt for the jury.
But police were determined to bring Pipkin to justice and ran through the evidence again.
We've got the quilt that has her blood on it. We know that was her blood on the quilt, her blood at the crime scene, and we can put the quilt in his truck.
We don't get two chances to try a murder case. He's found not guilty, that's it.
The DA was unconvinced he could get a conviction.
And we know that that quilt came.
A murder case is very difficult to make if it's totally circumstantial.
We know it's June Atkins.
You've got to convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that there's been a homicide and then prove beyond a reasonable doubt who committed the homicide.
She left that day. She had every intention.
Sheriff Hicks knew June's body was out there somewhere,
Somebody tried to hide.
and to him, the case was not
her
closed.
blood and her watch had been torn from her arm.
2 years later, on August 23, 1993, a fisherman made a gruesome discovery. The lower half of a female torso surfaced in the Tennessee River. Her family recognized the clothing, and they knew it was June. Kenneth Pipkin was arrested and charged with murder. Police believe that June threatened to expose their relationship. Pipkin killed her to ensure her silence. But with the help of forensic science, June's story was finally told.
For a small town murder, probably had as many expert witnesses as I've ever had in the case. I had a forensic pathologist that had done the autopsy. You had fiber experts, you had a blood expert from the TBI. It was a fascinating case to put together as a prosecutor.
Kenneth Pipkin was found guilty of second-degree murder. He is now serving a 20-year sentence. Some killers go to great lengths to keep their victims' whereabouts a mystery, leaving no bodies and only traces of the crime. There was a time when justice was scarce for these perpetrators. But today, forensic science arms law enforcement with the necessary weapons to convict, providing a witness where there is none. In the Florida Panhandle, a young passerby discovers a killer's dumping ground. A metal chain may be a link to a victim's final hours. But investigators must first confirm the identity from the charred bones if they ever hope to solve the brutal crime.
Jackie!
An idyllic backyard in rural Tennessee becomes the backdrop for the unthinkable.
Jackie!
A little girl disappears in broad daylight. With every passing hour, police lose hope of ever seeing her alive.
This one?
But before detectives can prove murder, they must find her body. Some killers choose to hide their victims. And investigators must then rely on forensic examiners to uncover proof of murder. These are just two extraordinary crimes that have made their way into the medical examiner's casebook. In this episode, some of the names have been changed. The Gulf Coast of the Florida Panhandle is known for its quiet beaches and peaceful living. But on March 4th, 1999, Okaloosa County's tranquil lifestyle was threatened. That afternoon, investigator Stan Griggs of the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office was called to an isolated wooded area. Children discovered a body while playing in the woods. Panicked, a young mother phoned police. In his 15 years with the department, Griggs had never seen anything like it.
There was a charred body that was secured to a tree with chains and rope. We actually could not tell definitively if it was male or female.
The investigators scoured the scene for clues, looking for anything that would tell them who this person was and why he or she died so violently. Although the crime scene was littered with debris, physical clues were scarce.
There wasn't a lot of evidence around the body. A few cans, a roll of duct tape, a couple items of clothing. We didn't find anything that would lead toward the identification of the victim, much less any perpetrators.
The victim's hands were bound with a blood-stained cord, and duct tape was stretched across what remained of the skull. Fragmented bones and tattered clothing were charred beyond recognition. It appeared the victim had been dead for quite some time.
There was insect activity, an insect activity that indicated that whoever perpetrated this made more than one visit.
The body showed evidence of maggots, a process that normally takes 2 weeks. But the finding posed more questions than it answered. The insects were burned just like the body. Forensic specialist Jan Johnson took samples.
It was a puzzle. We couldn't figure out why someone would come back, obviously, a couple of weeks after the person had died, to burn the body.
Dr. Michael Birkland, Chief Deputy Medical Examiner for the district, carefully prepared to recover the remains.
We were very intent on getting the body removed exactly the way it was pretty much positioned at the scene because of an injury that I identified to the neck region. That was going to be very important to keep the neck in that position until we got back and were able to x-ray.
The remains were taken to the morgue for autopsy. Evidence collected at the scene was transferred to the Forensic Science Unit at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. None of the items found at the crime scene produced anything concrete. Authorities were no closer to identifying the victim or the killer. After examination, it was determined the victim was an adult male, less than 6 feet tall. Establishing cause of death would fall to Dr. Michael Birkland.
When we got the body back, we went ahead and did x-rays looking for any projectiles or foreign bodies, and we did not see any evidence that this represented either a gunshot wound case, or there were no foreign knife tips or anything like that left in the body. The x-rays showed a number of fractures to the body of the upper extremities, what we call defense injuries, where the arms had been put up to try to ward off blows. There were a number of skull fractures that caused extensive fracturing of the base of the skull.
Dr. Birkland believed the victim was killed by a blunt force trauma to the neck. The autopsy report documented a brutal murder, and it also helped establish a sequence of events.
If you're transporting a dead body to what we would consider a secondary dump site, there's no need to bind it, gag it, and chain it to a tree. So It was common sense that told us that the body was probably transported there initially live, may have already indeed been injured because this was a fairly stocky person, and so without subduing him somehow, I would have thought you would have put up a considerable fight. And certainly you would not have to chain a dead person to the tree.
But Dr. Brooklyn was still puzzled by the insects. There were several populations of maggots present in the body. He concluded from their numbers and their size that the victim had been dead about a month.
The most startling revelation was that there was charred maggots, indicating that the maggots had been there for a while, grown up a little bit, and then somebody came back and set the fire. For the investigation, that meant that whoever had brought the body there had came back to the scene again.
Fingerprinting the victim was difficult. His hands had been damaged by fire. But there was enough soft tissue on the right thumb to make an impression.
Given that one of his fingers was not badly involved in the charring process, we were able to find enough minutia and ridge detail. So we were able to have sufficient information from that one finger to attempt a match.
While the prints were sent for comparison to the Florida Crime Lab, investigator Griggs was determined to learn the identity of the victim. The autopsy established the victim died sometime around the 1st of February. Investigator Griggs began checking missing persons reports.
We send out a bulletin over to law enforcement net that we have found the body and asking for any kind of missing persons information other agencies may have.
One stood out as a strong possibility. A local restaurant worker was reported missing on February 13, 1999.
Okay, we'll get right on. Thank you, sir.
Cordell Richards was a 32-year-old male of Asian descent. The last time anyone saw him was around the 3rd.
We checked with the Fort Walton Beach Police Department, and they told us a friend had reported Cordell Richards missing. They naturally went to the apartment to check on his welfare. There they found young people who claimed that they didn't know where he was.
I'm all right, how are you?
Oh, pretty good. I'm looking for Cordell. Does he live there?
A young student named Crystal Maestas rented a room from Cordell. 17-year-old Ron Bell was her boyfriend. The two teenagers confirmed Cordell left in early February, but they didn't know why.
Okay. Is there anybody else in the house?
Just us two now.
You mind if I take a look?
Good.
Sir, could you have a seat over there?
Ron Bell and Crystal Maestas stuck with a story that Cordell Richards just disappeared after receiving some unknown type of court papers. He piled up some black bags in the apartment, and the next day he was gone along with the black bags. They never saw him again.
What's your first name?
Crystal.
Crystal, could you do me a favor?
The teenager's story seemed suspicious.
Give me a call and let me know.
Sure.
Okay, here's my card. All my information's on the card. Okay.
Detective Griggs decided to interview the friend that reported Cordell Richards missing.
Just have a seat right there. I understand that you're the one that reported Cordell Richards missing.
Yes, correct.
Okay, you're a friend of his?
Yeah, we've known each other for about a year and a half.
Okay.
According to his friend, Cordell Richards was a good man.
So, Grandpa, you look like you're good enough to go play some golf later, huh?
He was especially close to his grandparents, spending a lot of time with them since his grandfather had fallen ill. Cordell was divorced with 2 small children.
Thank you so much.
He worked at 2 jobs in order to support his family.
Everybody I talked to about Cordell Richards told me what a responsible person he was, a hard-working person. He worked several jobs, and his bosses always considered him highly reliable.
Investigators finally believed they were about to put a name on the victim that had remained anonymous for all these weeks. The name was Cordell Richards. In Okaloosa County, Florida, investigators struggled to identify a body that was not much more than a skeleton. The victim was badly burned and chained to a tree. After checking missing persons reports, the sheriff's department uncovered a possible match. Forensic specialist Jan Johnson worked to identify the body using a single thumbprint.
This body was extremely decomposed and burned, and I was very shocked to find that there was still enough friction-rich detail to affect an identification. The fingerprints did match the fingerprints of the unidentified deceased, which was the skeletal remains of Cordell Richards. Investigator Griggs,
Fingerprints confirmed it. Cordell Richards was no longer a missing person. He was a murder victim.
That is correct.
Investigators returned to the Fort Walton Beach apartment complex where Cordell Richards had lived.
How you doing?
Hi.
Stan Griggs with the Sheriff's Office. Can we speak to you for a minute?
Sure.
Can we come on in?
Yeah.
Crystal Maestas answered the door.
What's going on?
I need to ask you a few questions about Cordell Richards.
Yeah, I rent a room for me.
You do? Which room?
The one right there.
Okay.
Forensic specialist Jan Johnson analyzed the apartment.
Okay, we have a search warrant for this apartment, okay? Because we're trying to locate Mr. Richards, okay? Here, why don't you look it over?
Okay, just...
If you want to step outside, yes, ma'am. It was sparse, but there were some items left behind that, to me, the average person wouldn't leave behind. I knew Cordell Richards exclusively rode a bicycle. He didn't drive. A bicycle was there.
It was a small but important clue. Griggs wondered if Cordell was taken from his apartment by force.
A visual examination did not detect any blood evidence, so we decided to use luminol. Luminol is a presumptive test which is used on trace amounts of blood or blood that's been cleaned up. We sprayed the apartment, and there were 8 areas that did give a positive reaction for blood. We've got a medium velocity spatter pattern here, it looks like. Also a couple of transfer stains. Looks like partial hand impressions. After I documented the blood spatter, I then swabbed those areas, and those swabbings were sent to our laboratory for DNA analysis, and the blood came back as being conclusive as that of Cordell Richards.
Back in the lab, Johnson tested her theory of how the spatter got onto the wall. Using blood-soaked sponges and paper targets, she reproduced medium velocity spatter.
Medium velocity spatter is 1 millimeter to 3 millimeters in diameter and normally is associated with forceful impacts from blunt force trauma.
Okay, thank you.
They now had proof Cordell Richards was brutally beaten in his apartment.
Hey guys.
But in order to find his killer, they needed to find out why.
Have you heard of any robberies, home invasions, or burglaries.
Detectives checked for reported break-ins in the area.
I haven't heard anything like that.
There weren't any. In fact, in recent years, there were very few robberies in the neighborhood.
I'll ask.
Okay, thanks. I didn't know why Cordell Richards was killed. We were looking at possible gambling debts, possible debts like he may have owed. That was a possibility. It didn't seem like he was broken in. It was a haphazard thing.
Investigators canvassed the neighborhood near where the body was found.
Do you remember anything?
One woman recalled seeing an unfamiliar car parked near the woods about a month before.
Right.
And I noticed two teenagers coming from those woods over there.
Okay.
And
It was a gray hatchback. It had a missing window.
like a compact car, and one of the rear windows was punched out or was broken because there was a black trash bag covering it.
Okay.
The next day, investigators found Ronald Bell and Crystal Maestas as they were about to enter a gray car matching the witness's description.
This your vehicle?
Yes, sir.
It is?
Yes.
Bell confirmed the car belonged to him.
You know Cordell Richards?
Yes, I met him a few times when I've come to pick her up.
You know Cordell Richards, ma'am?
Yeah, I rent a room from him.
Okay. What happened to your window on the vehicle?
I had a burglary a couple of weeks ago.
Evidence was mounting. Both teenagers knew Cordell Richards. Bell's car was spotted near the crime scene, and the victim's blood was found on the walls of the apartment Crystal shared with him.
I don't know where it's at.
It was enough to obtain a warrant to search the car. The car was searched and dusted for fingerprints. But no evidence was found connecting the vehicle to the victim. Next, investigators questioned officials at the school Ron Bell attended.
That you already saw in there?
I did note that he was gone from the 2nd to the 5th straight, and then quite a
He was
few
absent
days
several days in early
It's
February.
an unusual pattern for
Is
him.
it?
Come on in.
Ted Mazzo, a fellow student, confirmed Ronald Bell borrowed his truck twice during that time.
Let's see, you don't mind any answering any questions or anything I have today?
No, sir.
Okay.
But Mazzo was not the only person to have information on Bell.
Oh, what can you tell me about Cordell Richards? He told us that Ron Bell asked him to decipher the password on a computer. He described the computer to me. He also described the layout of the interior of Cordell Richards' apartment.
How hard can it be?
Ron and Crystal were trying to log onto the internet, but they couldn't get past the password.
You're useless, Michael.
They asked Paul Martin to hack in.
Can't you get a ride home or something?
Try something else.
Yeah, you gotta help us with some bags.
Just keep working on that till you get there.
Paul noticed that all the files on the computer belonged to someone named Cordell.
Leave it alone, man. It's not gonna work.
Mike, it's not gonna work. Let's go.
He also said that Ron Bell disposed of some property from the apartment and some dumpsters. We searched dumpsters up and down the area, didn't find anything. Of course, by this time it had been a couple months. We just had hopes that maybe something may have fallen out to the side. We did have some fortune where Cordell Richards' identification card was found near a dumpster by some telephone workers.
Although there was a wealth of circumstantial evidence, it wasn't enough.
Hey, Stan,
Yeah, can you hang on a second? Okay, thank you.
I gotta leave.
Without a witness to tie it all together, they couldn't make a case.
Anybody that won't talk to anybody but us.
Okay, be right there. Hey, can I call you right back? Okay, thank you.
On March 17th, investigator Griggs received a startling message. Someone wanted to talk about the murder anonymously. 32-year-old Cordell Richards had been brutally murdered. His body was so badly burned, the medical examiner had trouble establishing the cause of death.
Thank you.
Just as it seemed the case would go cold, investigator Stan Griggs of the Okaloosa Sheriff's Department received a call. The caller was young and terrified. He said he had information about the case. But he only agreed to talk to investigators anonymously. The informant claimed Renee Lynx, a friend of Crystal's, was bragging about the murder.
He told us that Renee Lynx told him that she, Ron Bell, and Crystal Maestas were going to kill a guy because the guy had made advances on Crystal. She and Crystal were going to seduce him. Ron Bell would hit him over the head, knock him out, and they would dispose of his body.
It was a chilling story. Renee Lynx was called into the sheriff's department for questioning. In exchange for a reduced sentence, Renee Lynx admitted she helped Ronald Bell and Crystal Maestas abduct Cordell Richards and chain him to a tree in the woods.
Tie his hands and being kind of...
Despite beating and burning him, Cordell Richards was still alive. They purchased a meat cleaver at a discount store to finish him off.
All right, if you could, just go ahead and stand up, place your hands behind your back, because you're going to be arrested for murder.
Renee Lynx was only 15 years old when she was arrested for murder. Crystal Maestas and her boyfriend, Ronald Bell, were also arrested. Their fate hung on whether or not investigator Griggs could prove they purchased a meat cleaver at a discount store, as Renee Lynx had alleged.
This store has better than average surveillance cameras. We've got video of Ron Bell, Crystal Maestas, and Renee Lynx not only buying the cleaver, but returning it for a refund.
That's exactly what I need. I'm gonna have to take that from you.
When you see their faces on the video, this was not a bad happenstance that got out of hand. They're laughing on the video.
Is that the original tape?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Is there any possible way you can trace the new owner of the meat cleaver?
Well, I have to check the bar.
They had records of where 3 cleavers had been returned. One was purchased by a credit card. They checked the inventory numbers and confirmed that that was the cleaver that was in question, the one that was used.
Yeah, that one right there, that one.
Investigators retrieved the meat cleaver as evidence.
Just get it out of here.
You sure you haven't used it?
In the lab, Jan Johnson analyzed the blade for blood. Ultimately, no blood stains were found. They would have to rely on circumstantial evidence and witness testimony to convict the 3 teenagers who purchased the cleaver.
Crystal Maestas gave a very condensed version of the murder of Cordell Richards.
Crystal didn't always get along with her landlord.
Are you guys deaf or something? I can't even hear myself think in there.
Come join us, we saved you a seat.
But she also knew Cordell was attracted to her. This made her boyfriend, Ronald Bell, very angry.
Is that seat for me?
He decided to do something about it. He knocked Cordell unconscious with a blunt object.
He was rolled up in a blanket taken to a place in the western part of our county. He revived. They secured him to a tree. They began beating him with a baseball bat. They take turns hitting him in various parts of his body. He's still moaning. He's unconscious, but he's moaning. And he's starting to revive again. And it's then that Ron Bell pulls out some cigarette lighter fluid, soaks Cordell Richards with it, and lights him on fire. And they come back the next day. Cordell Richards is still alive. He's moaning for help. They go to a nearby department store, buy a meat cleaver, go out there, and they finish him off. I think the whole community was horrified that essentially children this age committed such a crime.
Crystal Maestas was tried and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Ronald Bell is also serving a life sentence for his role in the murder. They were both tried as adults. Florida investigators combined science and determination to convict killers who were barely old enough to drive. But in Tennessee, when a child is the victim, a whole community comes together to track down a human predator. Montgomery County, Tennessee is located just 40 miles outside of Nashville. It's a place where life is simple and people feel safe.
Jackie! Jackie!
But on the afternoon of July 8, 1996, Jeannie Meyer learned the meaning of fear.
Jackie!
She was running late. Her son had a dental appointment, and her daughter Jackie was in the backyard picking blackberries.
Jackie! Jackie!
Jeannie's annoyance quickly turned to panic. Her daughter was only 9 years old, and now she was missing.
Jackie!
Can you describe her to me?
She's 9 years old. Okay. She had a pink shirt on, and she had her favorite little...
The Montgomery County Sheriff's Department responded. Jackie Beard was 4'7", with sandy blonde hair and blue eyes.
Okay.
She was wearing a pink shirt and jeans. Jeannie tried to think of anything unusual that happened lately.
I have some other ones, but that's really...
She recalled seeing a stranger in the neighborhood.
Hey, good kick.
He was talking to Jackie and her friends.
Around here in the woods or in your playground? Hey, little girl. When you're playing around here, if you just look on the ground and if you see something, you know, about 6 keys on a ring. Oh, yes, ma'am.
The man identified himself as Tommy Robertson, an undercover police officer.
And I lost my keys out here.
He said he'd lost his keys somewhere in the neighborhood.
To see if I could find them, and I saw you.
He wondered if the children had seen them.
If they had seen them around anywhere.
So your name is what again?
Yeah, it's Tommy, ma'am. Tommy Robertson. And I appreciate it if y'all see my keys around here anywhere, just call the police department.
Okay.
All right? Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate
Have a
it.
good day.
Okay.
They're her favorite shoes. They're her absolute
The Montgomery
favorite.
County police officer reassured Jeannie, more often than not, missing children come home.
We've got several officers right now.
In the meantime, they would do everything they could to find little Jackie.
All right, then we're going to keep this.
After a quick search of personnel records, investigator Billy Batson discovered there was no Tommy Robertson on the force. The optimism police felt now turned to concern, and every available officer was called in to find the missing girl.
Jackie! Jackie!
In Montgomery County, Tennessee, 9-year-old Jackie Beard was picking blackberries in her backyard.
Jackie!
10 minutes later, she disappeared.
Jackie!
Along with police, Montgomery County Rescue Squad coordinated the massive search effort, dispatching the K-9 unit and community volunteers. They combed the woods, searching for any sign of the missing girl. Billy Batson, an investigator with the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department, tried to remain optimistic.
It's a missing child at this point. We have initiated ground searches, including dogs and people who have volunteered to search the area looking for Jackie. Certainly our hopes were high that we would find her and that she would be safe and close to home.
Using the Myers house as their starting point, investigators fanned out. They searched the woods for hours. And with each passing hour, it seemed more likely that Jackie had been abducted. Children from the neighborhood were called into the sheriff's department and asked about the man posing as a police officer.
Can you look at these here and tell me which one looked close to you?
They gave descriptions of the stranger who called himself Tommy Robertson.
That one will work. This one? Let's capture that.
Feature by feature, a composite photo slowly emerged. In Jackie's neighborhood, the ground search intensified. There was no sign of the child or of the man police now suspected of abducting her. Police went door to door, hoping someone would provide them with any information regarding the little girl's whereabouts.
Hi, yes. How you doing? I'm Detective Shock. This is Officer Whitaker.
But nothing turned up.
We understand.
Investigators hoped media attention would bring them closer to finding Jackie and the stranger who police believed had taken her from her own backyard.
The next day, after this information had been in the newspaper, we started receiving several phone calls about an individual named Glenn Rogers who matched the description that was given in the paper, and that these people were concerned that he at least needed to be checked out.
Investigator Batson ran a background check. William Glenn Rogers had a long list of felony convictions. Police were dispatched to bring Rogers in for questioning. Rogers claimed that although he was in the Myers neighborhood the day Jackie disappeared, he never saw her. He was only looking for his keys.
Yes.
Police didn't believe him, and the results of a polygraph examination confirmed their suspicions.
No.
It indicated he was lying.
I've been out of work a long time.
Then he came up with a much different story.
Job that day.
He said when he couldn't find his keys, he returned to his car. As he put the car in reverse, he felt a bump, as if he'd hit a tree. Instead, he said he accidentally ran over a little girl, killing her instantly. Rogers panicked. He knew his record would make the accident seem suspicious.
He didn't know what to do. He got in the car and drove. He came to a bridge which goes over the Cumberland River, not far from that scene, and he got out of the car, went to the passenger side, got Jackie from the car, and threw her over the side of the bridge into the Cumberland River.
Batson, along with Special Agent Brett Murray of the FBI, were more than a little skeptical.
The interview right after the polygraph test, I did not believe. I did believe the fact that he was responsible for her disappearance, which he basically said he was, but the facts surrounding how she disappeared were not something that we believed. We knew there was more to the story. The key then was to try to find Jackie.
Rogers was placed under arrest while investigators checked out his story. The Montgomery County Rescue Squad and surrounding county squads were dispatched to the Cumberland River. They searched for much-needed physical evidence if they hoped to disprove Rogers' story that Jackie's death was an accident.
Glenn Rogers has confessed that he was responsible for Jackie Beard's death, and he said in his statement that he took her body and threw it off the bridge, the Zinc Plant Road that crosses Cumberland River. And at this time we've initiated dragging operations. If in fact that's true, we hope to recover her body.
Despite an exhaustive search, investigators came away empty-handed. There was no sign of Jackie. Police headed back to their only hope, the one person who knew where to find her. That man was Glenn Rogers, and this time they were determined to get to the truth. In Tennessee, a 9-year-old girl had been missing for 3 days. William Glenn Rogers, a convicted felon, claimed he accidentally hit Jackie Beard with his car. He said he panicked, then dumped her body in a river. A search team dragged the Cumberland River, but there was no sign of Jackie Beard's body. Investigators suspected Rogers was lying.
Yeah, let me call you back.
They called his wife in for questioning.
Detective shot.
Hi, Mrs. Rogers.
She admitted that on the night of July 8th, her husband left the house for several hours.
That's correct. He was about 3 hours late, actually.
His wife remembered the incident because she was angry.
He was so late.
Rogers came home late that night.
Bill, do you know how late it is? Where have you
She noticed he had mud on his pants and a spot of blood on his shirt. The car was muddy too. Rogers made a vague excuse. He said he'd been walking through the woods.
She was waiting for the car to take her grandkids to a school function, so she remembered that. She also indicated that at some point she noticed some small smeared fingerprints on the passenger side of his car on the windshield.
Detective Batson was determined to find out how those tiny fingerprints got there and whether they proved Jackie Beard was still alive when Rogers put her in the car. For that, he needed a closer look at the suspect's car. A forensic team searched every inch of the vehicle. For an older car, it was suspiciously clean. Rogers had done a thorough job of detailing his car. So thorough, there wasn't a shred of evidence that Jackie Beard had ever been inside it.
If there's anything that you want to
Frustrated, Batson questioned Rogers about the discrepancies between his statement and his wife's.
Well, now, you know, I've been thinking about this thing. Now, there is something I forgot about.
Rogers quickly changed his story to match hers. Without physical evidence or even a body, the sheriff's department couldn't prove him wrong.
Go in there. She opened
4 months to the day, on November 8th, police in nearby Stewart County received a crucial call. A deer hunter reported seeing human skeletal remains at the Land Between the Lakes Wildlife and Recreation Area.
245 Bravo, 10-4.
The call was relayed to investigator Batson.
Can you give me a description? The agent in charge down there had heard about this case, and he called me and described to me the clothing that they had found down there, and I knew at that point that it was possibly Jackie.
Investigators and canine units converged on the national park, along with agents of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. The combined team launched an intensive search to recover the remains. Investigators found a skull. Several strands of sandy blonde hair were still attached. Not far away, they discovered a clump of similar hair. Children's clothing was recovered and bagged as evidence. Dr. Murray Marks led a team of anthropologists from the University of Tennessee in a controlled search and recovery effort.
A crime scene, a forensic scene, is like an archaeological site. There's only one chance to excavate it. The crime scene was in a rural area, heavily wooded, though all the leaves were down. Many times that makes the recovery a little bit more difficult. We found elements scattered in a pretty wide area. And then we systematically go through looking at, for one thing, different layers of leaves. We can tell the seasonality. If the bones are on top of the leaves, obviously, that's happened after they fell. If they're under the leaf or under 2 or 3 layers of leaves, we know how many seasons have gone by. The skeletal remains were under 1 or 2 layers of leaves, so we knew some time had passed.
To learn more, Dr. Marks needed to analyze the skeletal remains. He returned to the forensic anthropology lab at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville.
We knew that we had a subadult individual. Prior to 20 years of age, you can look at dental development and the way the long bones grow and how long they are. So you can make an assessment of age relatively easy. Sex is difficult to ascertain prior to puberty. Prior to puberty, we cannot make an assessment of sex in skeletal remains. So we had no idea we were dealing with a female or a male.
The length of the long bones revealed that the victim was young, between the ages of 7 and 9.
271.
We're going to be interested.
Dr. Marks determined the remains were consistent with the little girls.
Pre-20 years, we're going to look at dental development.
The child had died 3 to 9 months ago, well within the time Jackie Beard disappeared.
Do you think that's credible? We didn't see cut marks that are indicative of sharp force trauma. We didn't see bludgeoning or blunt force trauma, no fracture to bone. We didn't find the fragile bones in the neck that would tell us about strangulation. There was no evidence on the bone that told us anything about a cause or manner of death.
Now, investigators could only hope to make a positive identification.
We also did mitochondrial DNA, comparing the DNA of Jackie with her mother, and that was a match.
Identifying the remains was an important step. But Batson was missing the physical evidence needed to link William Glenn Rogers to the death of Jackie Beard. Once again, science provided answers.
When her clothing was collected, it was sent to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation Crime Lab for further analysis. When they examined the clothing, they found some fibers on Jackie's clothing that they really couldn't identify. Fibers of this type were also found in Glenn Rogers' car.
But they didn't match the car's carpet fibers. Forensic investigators went back to Rogers' house and collected fibers from his carpet. The carpet fibers matched those on Jackie's clothing. Rogers had tracked the fibers into his car. The match conclusively placed Jackie inside the suspect's car.
Did you find your keys?
Hey, little girl. Yeah,
Montgomery County investigators theorized that on July 8, 1996, Glenn Rogers lured 9-year-old Jackie into his car by posing as a trusted figure, a police officer. He then drove to a secluded spot where he raped and killed her. He later hid her body in a secluded area in Land Between the Lakes National Recreation Area. In January of 2000, William Glenn Rogers was convicted of the abduction, rape, and murder of Jackie Beard. At his sentencing hearing, Jackie's mother spoke of her loss.
Jackie looked up to me more than anyone else, and I couldn't do the most important thing I would ever do in my life. I couldn't save her from a horrible situation. I cannot bring myself to imagine what she must have had to go through. My beautiful baby, scared, taken by force, molested, and then killed by a man she thought was a safe person.
William Glenn Rogers was sentenced to death. To cover their tracks, some killers go to great lengths to hide their vicious acts of violence. But in the end, most efforts fail. Forensic science can uncover the smallest clue, because even the most determined killer cannot commit the perfect crime. In the heartland of America, the Miami River acts as a makeshift grave. A severed torso washes up on shore. The gruesome discovery leaves investigators with unanswered questions. In San Diego, California, a killer has left behind pieces of evidence. Detectives must sort through these small clues to prove murder. Some killers go to great lengths to leave little trace of their violence or their victims. But the twisted path that led them to murder is often paved with lies. Sometimes those closest to us can be the most dangerous. Beneath a layer of trust can lie a hidden obsession. In this episode, some of the names have been changed. In Hamilton, Ohio, residents enjoy a peaceful suburban lifestyle. The inner city crime of Cincinnati is miles away. But on April 13th, 1998, it didn't seem quite so far. A couple had spotted a human torso washed ashore along the Miami River and called the Butler County Sheriff's Office. Major Anthony Dwyer was the lead investigator on the case. He was also the first to closely examine the remains. Because the body had been in the river, it was badly decomposed and barely recognizable.
When we first discovered the torso, it was up here on the bank, and there was very little we could determine from that. You could tell that it was a white person, but you couldn't even tell if it was a male or a female because of the condition of the body.
The investigators were unable to tell much about the torso. But one thing was clear: this was no accident.
The extremities being cut off. We took a close look at the bones. We looked at there were saw marks there.
The torso was carefully collected and transported to the morgue for a more thorough examination. Investigators continued to search the area for missing body parts or clues that would help them identify the body. They found nothing. Butler County Chief Coroner, Dr. Richard Burkhart, performed the autopsy. Without a head or even fingerprints to guide him, identifying the body would be difficult. And there was an additional challenge. He first needed to determine the victim's gender.
The unusual thing about the torso was that we weren't immediately able to say whether it was male or female. An examination was made of the lower abdomen or pelvis, and we found the presence of a uterus and ovaries. Obviously now the torso is a female. From there into the injuries on the arms, up in the chest.
But Dr. Burkhart still did not know how she died.
We x-rayed the body to make sure there wasn't any lead from a bullet. And examination of the heart, lungs for conditions that could have caused death, such as stab wounds, none were found.
The only certainty was that her head and limbs had been cleanly severed. The tool markings left on the body looked as if they were made with a household saw. Based on the temperature of the river and the level of the body's decomposition, Burkhart believed the woman had been dead for at least 2 weeks.
When we come to the neck,
At the Butler County Sheriff's Office, Major Dwyer read the autopsy report and began to slowly piece together a case. A woman was dead, but he knew little else. Each year, an average of 50 people are reported missing in Butler County alone.
Our first priority was to try and identify the body. Then the subsequent part is obviously it's a homicide or some kind of abuse of a corpse where they've cut somebody up. It's going to be a long run to even try and identify it.
If Major Dwyer hoped to ever identify the woman, he needed more information. To narrow the search, investigators turned to Dr. Elizabeth Murray, an anthropologist at the College of Mount St. Joseph in Cincinnati. One of only 50 certified forensic anthropologists in the country, she is an expert in analyzing skeletal remains. After boiling the bones to remove the flesh, Dr. Murray examined them to establish the victim's approximate age. Because the chest of the torso was slight in build, she could not rule out the possibility that the victim was a teenager. However, a closer examination of the collarbone, rib cage, and pelvis showed otherwise.
And I came up with a rough age range of probably 25 to 45 years of age at time of death, and I felt that she was probably somewhere right in the middle of that age range.
Dr. Murray next began the difficult process of determining the victim's height.
Normally you would measure long bones such as one from the legs, but in this case we didn't have those. I had to use some unusual methods. I had to take the clavicle from the torso, measure it, and try to come up with a stature based on that. And that isn't a bone that directly contributes to your stature, so that method was a bit unusual.
Dr. Murray concluded the victim was taller than average, between 5'6" and 6'1". Although the physical description was vague, it gave Major Dwyer a definite lead.
Torso only recovered.
He resumed his search where he had started it, back at the river.
Missing any and all missing reports.
Major Dwyer searched databases of missing persons reports starting 20 miles upstream.
From the Hamilton area north along the Great Miami River. The river runs to the south, so we figured the body was placed somewhere north of Hamilton.
They got a hit.
Approximate height, 5'8".
14 miles upriver, a woman from Middletown, Ohio, was missing.
Requesting all missing
She
person
fit the physical description, both slender and taller than average.
We found several missings from north of Hamilton. We started individually pulling those reports, and we located this one missing that was Cheryl Durkin. So we started focusing on her. She fit the bill as the best possible missing person to match what we had.
At the Middletown Police Department, Major Dwyer met with Detective Frank Hensley. Detective Hensley headed up the missing persons investigation on Cheryl Durkin.
What do you think about that one?
Cheryl's sister, Carla Edwards, reported her missing on March 20th, 3 weeks before the torso was found.
The sister was really concerned at that time because she hadn't checked in with her, and it was out of character for her not to do that. Carla, her sister.
Now they needed to confirm that the torso found in the Miami River was Cheryl Durkin.
2111.
I'll give her a call and go out and talk to her and see what...
Since neither dental records nor fingerprints could be used for identification, investigators turned to DNA for confirmation. In the lab, researchers compared 2 DNA samples, one from Cheryl's mother and the other from the victim. They matched. Cheryl Durkin was no longer a missing person. She was now the victim of a homicide. In hopes of tracking down her killer, investigators needed to learn as much about Cheryl's life as possible. They began by retracing the last moments of her life.
When we started looking towards suspects, and you generally look to the last to see him, the first to find him, and the closest to him. Those are your key factors in most homicides.
They hoped Cheryl's sister Carla could provide them with the answers they needed. They asked her about her sister's recent activities. Carla said that although her sister had been involved in drugs in the past, she appeared to be putting her life back together.
Just really been trying to get her life clean and make a fresh start.
Cheryl had moved in with Carla. In spite of all the difficulties, the two were very close.
This is for breakfast if you want it.
She told police that just before they discovered her sister's torso, she received a phone call from a man named Scott Rothwell.
Last time we talked, he really was saying some pretty
Rothwell asked her if Cheryl's body had turned up yet. He also made comments about her being cut up in a barrel someplace.
You know everything, and if you think of anything else, give us a call, and I'm sure we'll be in touch. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
This information quickly made him the prime suspect. A criminal background check indicated he had been arrested several times and accused of domestic abuse by his former wife.
He lived close to the river. There were some other attributes there that started to make us look very closely at him as a potential suspect. Mr. Rothwell lives in the city of Middletown. He was a close friend of Cheryl. She'd spent some time at his house. She called him quite frequently. Come on in. Have a seat.
Major Dwyer brought him to the Butler County Sheriff's office for questioning.
There you go, Scott. I appreciate you coming down.
Rothwell explained he'd heard rumors that a local drug dealer had killed and dismembered a woman fitting his friend Cheryl Durkin's description.
Couple 3 years.
He didn't know the man's name, but he agreed to help in any way he could.
I want to show you something here. When we first targeted Scott Rothwell as a suspect, one of the first things we did is we pulled his phone records. That enabled us to track phone calls that she had made to him and isolate when she was still alive. Then any known call ended at about February 24th of '98, and that helped us narrow down a time frame as to when she probably disappeared.
The last phone call Cheryl made to Rothwell was from a payphone on Garfield Avenue. He explained that Cheryl frequently called him from that payphone. Because she didn't have a car, she relied on friends for rides. Dwyer believed his story.
He was a pretty stand-up guy. He came forward, cooperated. He helped us quite a bit with the phone records. I'll tell you what, Scott, I appreciate you coming in. I know it's been a long day. As the case unfolded, he became less and less of a potential suspect.
The investigators were convinced Scott Rothwell was not a killer. Even with more information, it amounted to nothing more than an unsubstantiated rumor. They were no closer to solving the Cheryl Durkin case than when they began. Her killer, a person capable of extraordinary cruelty, was still out there. In Ohio, a vicious killer had murdered 34-year-old Cheryl Durkin and cut her body to pieces. Her torso had washed up on the shores of the Miami River. The victim's head, as well as her arms and legs, had not been found. Desperate for leads, they tried a new approach. Cheryl's remains were sent to Dr. Stephen Sims at the University of Tennessee Regional Forensic Center. As a tool mark expert, Dr. Sims needed to determine what was used to dismember Cheryl's body. Sims examined the distinctive markings on the ends of the bones.
I can look at striations and determine something about the shape of the blade. In this case, it's a very unique cut in that the striations or the cut marks in the cut surface of the bone are not straight. In fact, they show a fixed radius curvature. I saw numerous false starts, which usually indicates a power saw due to the fact that the blade could not penetrate and so it attacks the bones at different angles. The fact that the blade is round and a very high speed, a lot of energy given to the blade, all indicate mechanically powered circular saw.
It would have been difficult to cut through bone and tissue with a circular saw. Dr. Sims believed they were dealing with a brutal killer who would do anything to hide his crime. The doctor's theory provided investigators with new insight into the person they were looking for. News of the homicide outraged the citizens of Middletown.
Okay.
The police department was flooded with tips from anonymous callers. One woman agreed to meet with investigators, but she was too scared to come into the police department.
Okay.
She'd heard rumors that a local thug named James Lawson was responsible for Cheryl Durkin's death,
I have heard rumors.
and that he had hidden her body parts in his sister's garage.
And I mean, I've seen him around.
The sister's name was Rachel Zimmer. The woman knew both Cheryl and Lawson. She had seen them together on more than one occasion.
You've seen those two together?
Yeah.
Although the story seemed outrageous, police believed the young woman and obtained permission to search Rachel Zimmer's garage. Investigators scoured the scene, looking for clues. Although nothing was found, the search kicked the case wide open.
There was a flurry of activity that started to unfold from there. We were on the same street that Mr. Lawson lived on, and when we were there searching a garage, he started to take some actions by pulling up carpet, painting some walls. He had done several things that started to lend even more suspicion to him. Then we received another phone call from a woman stating that there were stains on this carpet that he was trying to remove. Is this the arrest location?
As investigators waited for a search warrant for the Lawson residence, they ran James Lawson's name through the National Criminal Database.
Right, that's Essential in Garfield.
The suspect had been in trouble before.
Yeah, sure.
His ex-wife had accused him of criminal trespassing.
Of 94?
Yeah, come on in. Sure.
Major Anthony Dwyer and Detective Frank Hensley served James Lawson with a search warrant.
So, we would like for you to come
Yeah,
down.
grab my shirt.
Sure.
He agreed to go to the police department for questioning.
He's got that.
Forensic technicians from the Butler County Sheriff's Office collected carpeting from the backyard.
We've got the carpet. All right, let's get out of here.
Inside the house, investigators found bloodstains along the baseboard in a hallway. Samples of the blood were collected for analysis in the lab. In the bedroom, the chemical luminol revealed bloodstains on both the carpet and the baseboards. Samples were taken there as well. Police searched James Lawson's basement, looking for anything that might tie him to the murder. They noticed the work area was freshly painted, using an unusually heavy industrial-grade paint. But the paint wasn't enough to stop investigators from finding an important clue.
Where they used the luminol, it looked like a slaughterhouse when it lit up with the amount of blood that was sprayed by the saw and cutting her up.
Although the circular saw was never found, the amount of blood in the basement convinced investigators that James Lawson had murdered Cheryl Durkin.
I want to talk to you about a homicide we're working. There was a girl, a torso, found.
Major Anthony Dwyer interviewed the suspect at the Middletown Police Department.
I think I did read something about like.
Lawson admitted that he'd heard of the murder, but he said he didn't know Cheryl Durkin.
Can you explain any of that to me? Why there's blood on walls over there?
Well,
He told police he was renovating his house.
hands in
He said he injured himself while he was cutting drywall.
got my hands down.
The blood on the carpet was his own.
Well, yeah, I appreciate
Dwyer believed Lawson was lying,
got a lot of work to do over there. We'll be over there.
but without more evidence to tie Lawson directly to the crime, they would have to let him go.
We had a lot of evidence we removed from the house, as well as the painted basement. We didn't have DNA to connect the victim from being in the house, so we didn't have enough probable cause to charge him at that point.
Over the next few weeks, the blood evidence was analyzed. Samples of blood taken from the house were compared to Cheryl Durkin's DNA profile. It was a positive match. Investigators now had enough evidence to arrest her suspected killer.
Warrant here for James Lawson. Did you enter it with a pickup radius of 1 and make sure the guys in the streets are aware of it?
But they were too late. With nothing to hold him, James Lawson had already fled. A young woman had been brutally murdered. Her severed head and limbs were still missing. Ohio police were closing in on a suspect. Although they finally had enough evidence to arrest James Lawson, he was nowhere to be found. It was a complicated case. Major Anthony Dwyer needed to find Lawson, but he also needed to find the missing body parts.
As this investigation unfolded and James was on the run, we still didn't have a cause of death. We did not have the head, the arms, or the legs. We just had the torso. That was causing us a great problem for prosecuting the case with no cause of death.
Investigators knew a murder conviction would be difficult to obtain if they did not find the rest of the body.
Find out everything you can about this phone number.
They looked at those closest to the suspect for clues that might lead them to the victim's body parts.
Thanks.
One of those people was Rachel Zimmer, James Lawson's sister. Major Dwyer and Detective Frank Hensley had already searched her garage. Now they picked her up for questioning.
We had to get away from all this.
We felt very strongly that she was involved in the case. We felt that she maybe even have buried some of the body parts.
Rachel finally admitted that Lawson had hidden Cheryl Durkin's body parts in a barrel in her garage. Then, when things settled down, she and her mother buried them in another part of the state. Rachel insisted that she hadn't heard from her brother since he disappeared.
Do you think you could find it if we head that way?
Yeah.
Knowing that she helped cover up the crime, she agreed to help them in hopes of a lighter sentence. She led police to the places where she and her mother had buried the body parts.
We parked in a very secluded area and we walked back into the woods. There was a trail. She looked back up at the roadway and could tell about how far she walked when she buried the parts.
Right here. This depressed area right here. Stick right in here. Yeah.
There, the investigators found a skull buried in a shallow grave.
We did some light digging and were able to uncover the top of Cheryl's face. As we brushed the dirt away, you could see the enamel on her teeth kind of lit up. And then we stopped at that point to bring in the forensic anthropologist, Dr. Murray, to do the complete excavation. Yeah, this is Lieutenant Dwyer. Yeah, go ahead and put an all page out for the detectives. We need some people up here to secure this area.
Backed by a team of anthropologists and police officers, Dr. Elizabeth Murray excavated the rest of Cheryl Durkin's body.
Because of my background in archaeology, I used modified archaeological techniques to excavate the remains. The shallow grave sites contained the head and neck, and also the right leg and both of the feet.
After processing the remains, Dr. Murray examined the skull to determine the cause of death.
There were at least 4 impact sites to the skull. There was some damage to the region of the cheek here that extended across the nose, and that could have been 1, maybe 2 different blows to the face. And there was a sharp margin here at the edge of the nose that looked like the weapon had some kind of an edge to it. Also on the side of the skull, there was an area of damage here that was blunt trauma, where a large piece of bone had been driven into the skull from a lateral aspect inward. And then a small lesion behind the ear here where something had impacted the skull from behind. So obviously the person was battered with some kind of a blunt object.
The lab tests confirmed the suspicions of the investigators. The DNA evidence obtained from the torso, the skull, and the limbs all matched. They all belonged to Cheryl Durkin. Now, police turned up the heat on one of the people who helped Lawson dispose of the body, his mother. 46-year-old Susan Abdow was arrested at her home on September 1st, 1998. Abdow admitted to her role in the cover-up, but claimed she didn't know anything about the murder until after the fact. She told investigators that she was only trying to protect her son.
Well,
according to Abdow, James had left town and had not contacted her. Once again, investigators hit a dead end. Lawson was on the run, and his trail had gone cold. Months passed. And then Dwyer got a phone call.
Criminal profiling show contacted us and wanted to feature him as a suspect that was on the run. So they came in, they filmed it. A few weeks later, it aired.
Again, tips poured in by the hundreds. They received a phone call from an elderly woman in Indiana.
Detective section, Hensley.
She claimed her granddaughter was living with a man she believed to be James Lawson.
When's the last time they saw him? Okay, we'll be right there. She actually had a video with Lawson's picture on it. At that time, we went to Indiana. She showed us the videotape there, and we immediately identified a man she knew as David Wallace as James Lawson.
Not today.
She said he had been acting suspiciously since the broadcast. He was extremely uneasy about being photographed or videotaped. An arrest team from the Middletown Police Department, as well as officers from 4 other departments, surrounded Lawson's residence.
Hands on top of your head. Hands on top of your head. What is this?
Lawson was arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of Cheryl Durkin.
David Wallace.
Lawyer first.
During interrogation, Lawson admitted nothing.
Stand up.
But the evidence against him was overwhelming. Based on the evidence, investigators believed that Cheryl had stayed the night at Lawson's house after he picked her up at the payphone. The couple argued, Lawson lost his temper, and Cheryl paid a tragic price. He then dumped her body in the Miami River, hoping it would disappear forever. On December 13th, 1999, James Lawson was convicted of the murder and dismemberment of Cheryl Durkin. He was sentenced to 21 years to life for murder, evidence tampering, and gross abuse of a corpse. James Lawson believed destroying the identity of his victim would mask his guilt. But a relentless investigation and solid forensic evidence exposed his brutal crime. In Southern California, investigators faced an equally disturbing case. In order to solve the crime, they would have to delve deep into the mind of an obsessed killer. In the summer of 2000, the city of San Diego, California, was the site of a gruesome discovery. On August 14th, a young man searched a dumpster outside a pet shop. He was looking for cans to recycle. Inside a paper bag, he saw something that startled him. It looked like a charred finger. Investigators from the San Diego Police Department were called to the scene. They questioned the man who called in the report. He said he was collecting aluminum cans when he found what he thought were fingers.
Could you stay right here? We're going to go ahead and check it out. But could you stay right here first? Sure. Okay, thanks.
Although they appeared to be human fingertips, detectives needed to be sure.
Call the forensic specialist.
They called in experts to analyze the findings. Tom Washington, a latent fingerprint expert, searched the contents of the dumpster. To avoid contamination, he isolated each piece of potential evidence on white lab paper. He knew immediately they were dealing with something highly unusual.
Well, right off the bat, we could tell they were human fingertips because they had the fingernails on them.
He found 8 fingertips in all. Investigators sifted through the dumpster, careful not to disturb any evidence. Along with the fingertips, they also found a number of other items, including a pair of bolt cutters. On the cutters, they noticed a bar-coded SKU number. Police believed it could lead them to the store where they were purchased.
That's good.
And perhaps the most chilling was a page of handwritten notes that outlined the crime step by step.
There were some papers that had different things written on them, kind of a to-do list. Things like rent a vehicle large enough to extract a body, time off from work, console with the victim's grieving family. Basically a schedule of things that the murderer had planned on doing.
The evidence in the dumpster pointed to a crime that had been carefully planned and then brutally executed. Whoever did this wanted to make sure the identity of the victim remained a mystery. San Diego police were facing a complex case. Sergeant Bill Holmes knew it would not be easy.
Well, initially we didn't have any leads. When you have no idea where your crime scene is or where the rest of the body is, that's a tremendous challenge.
Investigators hoped the crime lab would find more answers. Forensic expert Tom Washington examined the fingertips.
The main challenge was identifying the victim. We had the fingertips, but we didn't know who they belonged to.
But the tips were so badly charred, a readable fingerprint would not be possible. Police knew they would need more information if they ever hoped to find out where these fingertips came from and how they ended up in the dumpster. 8 human fingertips had been found inside a dumpster in San Diego. Who they belonged to and how they got there were anybody's guess. Police looked at items found in the dumpster for clues that might lead them to the killer. At the San Diego Police Crime Lab, the bolt cutters were examined by forensic specialist Sean Montpetit. Investigators suspected they had been used to cut off the missing victim's fingers.
When I looked at the bolt cutters, I noticed what appeared to be small pieces of apparent tissue on the cutting surfaces.
It was determined to be human and saved for DNA analysis. But no fingerprints were found on the item. Investigating further, police hoped the bolt cutters would yield more clues. Using the SKU number, Detective Bill Holmes set out to see who purchased them.
So I sent detectives to some stores in the area. We were able to locate where the bolt cutter was purchased, a hardware store in the area. The bolt cutters were purchased with a credit card, but because of the time of day when we got the information, we couldn't access the computer to find out who that credit card belonged to. We had the number, but we couldn't find out at that time who it belonged to.
Were there any other items that were bought by any chance?
The investigators noticed an additional charge on the credit card.
If you rented a machine, you had to get a credit card.
The same person who purchased the bolt cutters also rented a carpet cleaner.
In doing further checking, we learned that that credit card was used to pay for the rental of the rug doctor at the same store. But for the rug doctor, you had to fill out and sign a rental contract.
The name on the rental contract was Calvin Parker. Police now had a solid lead to track down. A background check revealed that Calvin Parker had no criminal history, was a veteran, and certainly did not fit the profile of a brutal killer. Detectives were beginning to think this case would go cold. They got an important break. A few miles north of San Diego, in Carlsbad, California, two residents discovered something unusual on their daily walk.
We were walking so we were looking at the trash can, so we walked a little close to it, and it...
Although it was an ordinary trash can, the lid had been secured shut with duct tape.
Stay right back here by the car, and I'm gonna go take a look at it, okay?
The trash can emitted an unusually strong, foul odor. The officer carefully opened the trash can and discovered the body of a woman.
I need a coroner's van to 5000 Christopher Street.
At the San Diego County Medical Examiner's office, Dr. Christopher Swalwell examined the victim, a white female in her early 30s. The level of the body's decomposition put time of death somewhere between 1 and 3 days earlier. She was naked except for a scarf around her neck. Since his office had been notified of the findings in the dumpster, Dr. Swalwell knew what to look for.
The fingers were all missing, so that's when we sort of put two and two together and worked under the assumption that those two were related.
Dr. Swalwell determined the cause of death to be a large cut on the side of her neck, which severed her jugular vein.
The other significant injury she had was a laceration on the scalp, which actually had an underlying skull fracture, so that was a significant injury.
There was also evidence that the victim had been raped. Dr. Swalwell noted strange bruises around the victim's wrists, on her face, and on her back, indicating the woman had been beaten prior to her death. At the same lab, Dr. Norman Sperber, a tool mark expert, was called in to examine the strange markings on the victim's body. He believed the killer had handcuffed the victim behind her back, and that the cuffs had left the deep marks on both her wrists and on her back.
We took out some handcuffs from property down at the San Diego Police Department. I applied those handcuffs to her wrists and had her body face down on the examining table, and the handcuffs just came right to place where that horizontal mark was, just on the lower back.
The victim was restrained and subdued before she was murdered. Investigators went to look for Calvin Parker. He wasn't home, but police kept his house under surveillance.
We had some of our special investigations detectives go and sit on that residence to see if Calvin showed up.
Female, 20 to 30, red hair.
Although the investigators were making progress, the victim still remained nameless. Investigators searched missing persons reports going back several days, hoping to put a name on the body. They didn't find any remotely matching the victim's description anywhere in San Diego County or surrounding areas. As news of the grisly homicide hit the streets, people came forward with information. One witness lived in an apartment facing the dumpster. She had seen something unusual the night before the fingers were discovered.
She said that she saw a rental truck back up to the dumpster. A black male exit the truck and throw a couple bags into the dumpster and then leave.
The witness also remembered seeing the man throw something into the bushes.
Her initial impression was that it was a cigarette, but she didn't see any ashes or sparks coming from it.
Investigators returned to the scene and searched the area. They found the tip of the victim's right thumb. The tip was taken to the San Diego Police Crime Lab. Tom Washington performed the examination. The print had enough ridge detail to capture a clear print. But after running it through the database and coming up empty, they still had no one to compare it to. Sergeant Holmes focused detectives on their newest lead, the rental truck spotted by the witness.
With that information, sent a detective to check the rental agency that handles that brand of truck. Agencies, there are several in the San Diego area, and the detective eventually found an agency in the Mission Valley area.
The name on the rental contract was one they had heard before, Calvin Parker. Investigators confiscated the truck and took it to the impound lot. The chemical luminol revealed a circular blood stain. Someone had been bleeding inside the truck, and police believed it was their victim. After a frustrating start, with nothing to go on but discarded fingertips, San Diego police now had enough evidence to arrest a suspect in the murder of a young woman. Although they now had a readable fingerprint, she was yet to be identified. Investigators had found a ring of blood in a vehicle rented by Calvin Parker, a man whose name came up early in the investigation. At the San Diego Police Crime Lab, Sean Monpetit compared the tissue on the bolt cutters to the victim's DNA.
DNA analysis of the tissue revealed that it was in fact tissue from the victim.
He then compared the findings with the blood in the truck. Both the blood and the flesh on the bolt cutters matched the victim's DNA. Police now had the direct evidence they needed to obtain a search warrant for Calvin Parker's apartment. Detective Bill Holmes led the team.
We had enough information to believe that Calvin was responsible for this crime and that it probably occurred where he lived. So we obtained a search warrant to search that residence and search his person.
Police cautiously entered the suspect's residence. There was no sign of him, but as they began searching, investigators found clues that made everything fall into place.
When we entered the apartment, we weren't sure who our victim was. We didn't know a name. We were sure that the Carlsbad body belonged to our fingers, but we had no idea who she was until we entered Calvin's apartment. And then we found her pictures and found her identification card.
Her name was Misty Gear, and she was Calvin Parker's roommate. Investigators would spend the next week working 18-hour shifts to recover over 100 pieces of evidence.
Well, we found a variety of notes and documents. In the kitchen, we found some credit card applications using Misty's name. We found some of her checks that had been filled out and made out to Calvin. We found some notes, both at the dumpster and at the apartment, sexual in nature, pointing directly at Misty, that were written by Calvin.
The evidence against Calvin Parker was quickly mounting. Forensic examiners sprayed luminol throughout the apartment to detect any blood. Although the carpet had been recently cleaned, massive bloodstains led from Misty's bedroom into the bathroom. At the San Diego Police Department, Tom Washington compared the victim's right thumbprint obtained from the thumb found in the bushes to the thumbprint on Misty's identification card. The two prints matched. The victim was positively identified as Misty Gear. Investigators hoped those who knew Misty best would lead them straight to Parker.
We have some questions about Misty Greer. Understood worked here?
They asked her co-workers about the suspect's relationship to Misty.
He and Misty had been roommates for about 3 months, each having their own bedroom and bathroom, strictly platonic, although he did have desires for her. She wanted nothing to do with him in that way.
Police now had a motive. Calvin Parker was obsessed with his roommate. But they still needed to find the missing suspect. The apartment was still under 24-hour surveillance. On the morning of August 15th, Calvin Parker stopped by his apartment to pick up his mail.
There it is. Hey, Calvin. You know why we're here? Yeah. Put your hands behind your head. Stay there. Put your hands behind your head.
He was arrested and taken in for questioning.
We found the girl's fingers in the dumpster.
In the interrogation room, police confronted Calvin Parker with the overwhelming evidence they had compiled against him.
So please tell me what happened.
Parker told Sergeant Holmes his version of events that led to Misty's death.
Calvin said that he was home watching TV in his bedroom when Misty returned from work about 10:30 or so that evening. She went into her bedroom, was watching TV. About half an hour later, he went into her bedroom, sat on her bed, they watched TV for a little bit, and then they had consensual sex.
According to Parker, Misty agreed to be his girlfriend, then changed her mind. They argued, and she insulted him. He said he couldn't take it and just snapped.
He lost his temper, picked up a picture frame that was next to the bed, and struck her 3 times, once in the head, in the throat, and in the chest. She started bleeding profusely.
The extent of her injuries and the handcuff marks on Misty's wrists told a different story.
We did find picture frames next to the bed, none of which were damaged. none of which were strong enough or heavy enough to do the damage we saw in Misty's body.
Investigators believe Calvin Parker was attracted to Misty. When she didn't return his affection, he grew dangerously obsessed and attacked her while she slept. He then dragged her body into the bathroom, where he cut off her fingertips to destroy her identity. On July 17, 2002, Calvin Parker was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. Murderers will go to extreme lengths to avoid prosecution, destroying all traces of the crime and their victims. But even the most careful killers cannot anticipate the precision in which forensic science will unearth even the most hidden obsessions.